here we are. Hello, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day. It's February 14th, 2016, and you're looking at episode 30 of Percussion. With me, as always, are Megan Arns.
Hello.
Ben Charles.
Hi, everybody.
And Laurel Black.
Hi.
So joining us today from Piteå, Sweden is percussionist, composer, and educator Anders Astrand. As a mallet specialist, Anders regularly performs and gives clinics throughout the U.S., Latin America, Australia, and Europe. With his percussion ensemble, Global Percussion Network, he has toured extensively in Sweden, Europe, the USA, and South Korea. And I would like to quote Ben Charles, who once said about 10 minutes ago while we were getting ready, he said, Anders could improvise on a refrigerator and it would sound amazing.
Wow, thanks.
You can put a quote for me on your website if you want.
I will. Can I use that all the time? Can people call you?
But I have to agree, I've heard him improvise many, many times, and it always sounds amazing, and that has to be sort of, I think it's fair to say this is what you're known for, is your contemporary improvisation and recording and collaboration, and it's really, really fantastic. So Anders, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
So speaking of where you are, I just want you to know that I scraped ice off my car this morning, and then I looked up the temperature in Piteå and here, and it is colder here right now.
I know that. We are lucky.
Wow.
And
How
You can be real smug and say that it's warmer here than both of there.
Yeah, way to go, Ben. You win. Yeah. Anders, so what's going on? Like, what do you have coming up, and what have you been doing lately? And just bring us up to speed a little bit. I think the last time I saw you was a quick hello and see you later at PASIC.
Oh yeah, that must be like 2 years ago, right? Because I couldn't make the last PASIC. So
that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. I did the last year, 2015, was an amazing year. I mean, I was traveling almost all the time. I think last January, 1 year ago, I was in Ecuador for 2 times in 1 month.
Wow.
And I was in the States like 3 times in 2 months or something, and to Uruguay, been playing with different kind of groups and so on. So it's been totally fantastic.
Has Zildjian gotten you a private jet yet?
They're working on it, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I saw on your calendar that you'll be in Tennessee next month.
Yes. I go in 2 weeks. I go to Kentucky first, and I actually got invited through a choir in Lexington, which I played with some years ago. I mean, Sweden is a really choir country. Choir and accordion, that's sort of what Sweden is most known for, actually, musical, on my side, sort of. And so I work with a Lexington Chamber Chorale, really great conductor, and when I was there, I think it's like 4 years ago or something, I did, again, I improvised between the pieces, I improvised in the pieces, so they got super excited, and I had a great time. So now they have a university, so they said, can you come back? And I said, sure. And Lexington is a very second home in a lot of ways, because good friend of Jim Campbell and Brian Mason and these people, so there's the percussion at the same time, so good timing.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there anywhere, I would love to know, is there anywhere you are, still looking to travel to? I feel like you've been everywhere 3 times, and is there still anywhere left to go?
Oh yeah, many places. Like, I mean, South Africa, India, these people.
You have
and
South Africa on your calendar, don't you?
I had, but it actually got cancelled in the last minute.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's like things happen in those countries all the time. And there was a producer said, sorry, we cannot make it. And I think that's part of the game. You probably know that as well. It's like, in the freelance business, and especially when you travel to those different kind of countries where there is different kinds of crazy situations, sometimes it can get cancelled in the last minute.
Yeah.
You just need to be ready for it, sort of.
Yeah.
But at the same time, when you come to those places, it's totally amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's the part of to be a musician that I could never dream of, that I will, for example, go to Uzbekistan. That's not the place I think about, but I've been there twice, working with a fantastic modern ensemble, like a Boulez ensemble. including 2 kind of folk music instruments, and totally amazing. And again, I brought some really modern crazy stuff together with some improvisation, of course, and we filled the house and had a fantastic time. So
That's amazing.
yeah, I always, when you think about it, it's like we play some notes on the instruments and it takes us around the world. I think it's totally fantastic.
How long have you had this type of traveling schedule? How many years would you say?
I would say it really took off like 2002 something. It sort of really started like in the year of 2000. Everything. If you want like a long story short, okay, how it started, because I mean it's probably for everyone, I guess. But when I had my freelance career in Sweden, I was teaching all that stuff. But in the in the middle of 90s, I played with 2 saxophone players who from the States lived in Sweden, and after a while they moved back to Chicago. And they called me after the first week. They went back and studied and did their doctoral studies at Northwestern, and that was Michael Burritt's first year. I never met him, and they said, "We met your brother here." I said, "Really?" Like, you know, and I never really been to the States more maybe once or twice before playing something. Never been to PASIC, which was a dream. And got to the school in '96, met Michael for 10 minutes in the corridor. I took a CD from him and I said, "Can we meet tomorrow?" "I have 10 minutes. That was his first year. And we met the next day, and I said, "Can you come to Sweden?" And this time I was teaching up north in Piteå. Casey, you know where it is, you've been there. And yeah, can be cold. Anyway, so from I think it was 97, January 97, Mike came for the first time, and after 10 minutes of talking, it felt like we've been knowing each other since we were kids. And then playing together, and he said, you need to come to the States. I said, "Why?" "Because you're unique." "Really?" But you must be famous in Sweden." It's like, "Welcome to Sweden." It's like different, you know. It's a smaller country, and then we have a sort of thing called jantelag. It's not a bad thing, but it's like you can never stick up and say, and if they ask you, like, "Ben, you're a great player," and you say yes, they will say, "Oh, he's like this." But if you say, "Oh, I'm okay," "Oh, you know, he's good, but he don't really have the confidence enough," and all that kind of stuff. So it's different kind of way of approaching things. And I think in a way sometimes can be healthy, but it can also have some negatives, of course. But I think it's very true that you never really profit in your own country, except if you probably come, like if you live on a continent like in the States or Australia or something. It's different because you have so many different people. Let's say in Sweden, all of us sort of really know who the other person is. It's good and bad. It also means, you know, when you will play somewhere and so on, it's like you need to wait maybe for a year for next tour or something. So, and I felt I would like to express. I didn't know what I would like to express really, but I had a passion for the vibes and marimba, always had, and suddenly there was an opportunity. So anyway, so he invited me to the Bands of America summer of '97 or '98, what it was, and it was like, for me, I couldn't dream of it. You know, the week before I've been playing for a Swedish teacher, was like, "Thank you," and then the next week it's like, "Yeah, woo!" It's like wait a minute, what's going on here? So that was sort of the intro, and then I did my PASIC '99, and I couldn't believe it. It was like it was so much fun.
Was it a solo concert?
No, it was like, I think it was a clinic performance, and I had some students with me, and we played, and I just remember it was filled up with people, and after the session was like a business card all over, and people were crazy, and I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? It's like, you know. So then I went back home and I started thinking, how should I do this? So I contacted a friend of mine who is working with a computer company, and I said, how do you do it? How do you do your investment plans and all that stuff? And he said, we have a 3-year plan, etc., blah, blah, blah. And I took some ideas of it. And I mean, if you go in the computer business, there is always money, and it's added up money. But music, all of us know that it's not a place where you make money, but we that's not about the whole thing. It's like about what you can make for kind of connections, how you can grow as a person, and what can you offer to other people. And that really happened. It took a while, but I would say after 5 years, it started to really be regular.
So I had a question. In the U.S., it's always strange to me that people even get into marimba and vibraphone because most people don't know what these instruments are. And I recently read Gary Burton's autobiography, which was really good, and he talked about how he got into vibraphone playing as a child. What was there like a teacher in Sweden that had a vibraphone that you learned from, or like where did you get into this?
By the way, it's a great book. I'm in
Yeah.
the middle of it. It's a wonderful book. No, it was actually in my hometown. I grew up in a really small town. I had a fantastic piano teacher, and also I always liked to play drums. And then there was one amateur musician who had a vibraphone, so I borrowed it for a while, and it was okay. But then when I entered up to Piteå, I was 16 years old when I went to a school in Swedish called folkhögskola. That means like nowadays it's like a preschool before you go into the university. You can, instead of doing high school studies, you can do it there. It's a little different way of study, but it's if you're totally dedicated to music, it's fantastic. Or it was. But we had our own percussion house. Our own key can be there anytime, so I lived there. And then in the weekends, I played with the dean of the school, and his best friend was a fantastic vibe player. So I was sitting like behind him, like 1 meter, and I started to dig that instruments more and more. And coming from piano background, I was thinking, I should play that. And so I never really took any lessons, or I just got a big passion for the instruments. So I took all the piano skills and tried to figure out how to do it.
Gotcha.
So that's sort of, yeah.
Were you able to get recordings as well over there?
Yeah, and of course I got like Gary Burton, all those things, and Double Image, Red Norvo, all of them. I mean, I bought through catalogs and tried to figure out what you can find and so on.
Gotcha.
This was like before internet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, hey, let's dive into a little Facebook question real quick. Gloria says, how would you describe some of your compositional techniques for incorporating improvisation into your works? Also, how much improvisation do you think constitutes a work that's considered improvisational? To clarify, as in The King of Denmark by Morten Feldman indicates that the last measure should have as many sounds as possible versus a jazz work, which clearly has a lot of improvisation built into it.
That's a good question. I mean, personally, if I write something, let's say I would write something to a person I know, I would give a lot of freedom. And of course, from a conversation. And some people, I think it's different. I mean, let me put it this way. If you include a lot of improv in for example, in an ensemble piece, it's not always the case that it will be played. Because I think part of the game is that people get scared. They don't know what to do. Or on the other hand, if you give it to a person who have big passion for it, you know that it will be like flying. So I try to be kind of always include something that you can improvise. But there is also, I think, sometimes a misunderstanding that's like, oh, improvise, that means that you need to know all the chords and scales, or all the scales and all that stuff. But I'm thinking more about sounds sometimes. It can be like that you have one bar open and you say find sounds, low sounds or high sounds and so on, just to get people to start to get some freedom and get brave enough to make their own choices. So that's how I see it. Personally, I really like when composers give you a lot of freedom, because that means that you can put your own fingerprints on the piece, really. I mean, it's different if you cannot really probably do that in a symphony orchestra. That would be really hard. But
you could also get fired, yeah.
yeah, it can be different. And I've been on those moments, and it's you have 60 people. It's in the end you're down to 3 people who actually should improvise, because otherwise it's like a big mess or something.
Speaking of symphony orchestra and more traditional pieces, how do you listen differently to a piece of music that's 100% composed and prescribed versus something that leaves a lot of room for improvisation? Like, what do you look for in those two types of pieces?
I mean, in a symphony, of course, it's many times it's, if you have a conductor, you can really have a passion for that piece or repertoire or whatever. You get some kind of voice, of course, from the conductor and from the orchestra, because it's a collaboration. And that can give me, sometimes I can feel like, wow, this really sounds like, yeah, it can be composed, but it can also sometimes sounds like it's a great improvised thing, because it's really fresh, it's have an energy, and so on. So it's different, and sometimes it don't really hit you, to be honest. And then in the and then on the other hand, if you have, I mean, I played a lot of chamber in the 80s, where it was a lot of modern and was open for a lot of graphics and all the stuff. It's, if you don't pay attention to that in the rehearsals, it can sound really, really kind of boring and bad. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes that's also can maybe be the answer that people don't like that music many times.
Yeah, sure. It seems to me, I just had this thought while you were explaining. It seems like improvisation will always have emotion. Like, you need emotion to even pull it off. And I mean, I guess I've seen people improvising where I feel like, oh yeah, they're not too into it, they're not feeling it. But I've definitely seen symphony performances where they're definitely not into it, and they are just playing and they're just hating it. It's like you can play that music and hate it, but you can't really improvise and hate it. It's,
No, it's. I think it's about confidence. I mean, everything is about, I think, confidence in a lot of ways. But it's like, I had actually a great experience about this. Speaking of this, I played some years ago in Poland with a symphony orchestra, and we played 2 folk songs, super arranged, and of course some open space for me, and then I was thinking, how should I do this? Because I want something between these pieces. It was like a Swedish folk song that was a Duke Ellington tune. And as soon as you see the vibraphone, you think, oh, he will only play jazz stuff. And I'm thinking, let's do a nice mix here. So I was running, and then I came to the orchestra. I said, can you help me? Can we take a boat from Sweden to the States together? And this is in the old times, when a lot of Swedes moved to America. Can you think about those things? And everybody's like, yeah. So I don't want, like, all this kind of nice melodies. I want sounds from you. Can you help me? And on the rehearsal, and I asked the conductor, was a young conductor, hungry to do a lot of new stuff. And I said, then we can end, let's say we land on a D together. Then we know that's the cue to go on or something. I got everybody with me. And it's true, before I was thinking, maybe they will step out and walk away. But it was magic. And in the intermission, some of the players, probably half of the strings, came up to me and said, thank you for this experience. And I was thinking, wow. And it was probably because I was so super convinced that you should do this with me. Mm-hmm. And I think that's part of it. And I showed them some ideas how I think about it, and then so I was lucky.
Amazing.
But I think it was what you sort of try to send out, and I think Casey, what you're into is like sometimes you say to a person, okay, let's say here's a C mixolydian. Okay, great. Now I know how to improvise. No, you don't. Right. That's a tool you can use. Right. That's yes. A lot of notes, but now you need to figure out how to use them in your way and to express them.
Sure.
For example.
Wow.
Sure.
That sounds like that's such a great experience. I've had an opposite one with a chamber concert where a person that I play with a lot, we love to improvise together. Mm-hmm. But we were part of a quartet, and there was one person that wasn't interested, that didn't want to do it, but the piece that was chosen for us was highly based on improvisation, and it had such potential to be interesting, and it ended up so unsuccessful because it's hard to figure out how to engage someone who's not at all interested, that just doesn't want to do it. So that's that's really great that you were able to do that.
I think it's a testament to his personality and his, you know, his like, don't worry, I've got you. You know, kind of make this safe framework where people feel okay.
One of my favorite things I ever heard Anders say was when I had him in Florida a few years ago, and you know, people always ask, how do you start improvising? And one thing he said was like, man, I really wish I had the royalties on the C major scale, because that's what everyone plays to warm up, is we play up and down C major scales. And it's like, why don't you just try something else every now and then, and you know, it can turn into improvisation without you really even realizing it. So I've certainly adapted that in my own playing, and I haven't turned into Anders yet, but I've gotten somewhere.
Thanks for that. I mean, you know, I think it's true that it's very interesting, and it's kind of universal wherever I go, and I always ask the question on seminar, not always, but many times, like, do you split about, if you say like you do warm-ups, you do etudes, and then you play the pieces? And many times you see hands like, yeah, the pieces, like that's the music. Etudes is like, go more to the warm-up side, and warm-up is not music. I said, where is the music? And many go towards the music, like the pieces. And for me, it's like the warm-ups is where you start to make music as soon as you walk up to the instrument, or not even instruments, or whatever you think about it, sounds and so on. I think it's an attitude that you sort of need to work with. But sure. I think that comes probably maybe after school sometimes, or if you have a teacher who's thinking that way, or a person or something. But all of you probably know what I'm talking about, right? Yeah. Because you can hear practice rooms, like typical examples like scales down, and then suddenly it's like la da dee da da dee da da da. It's like what's going on? It's like suddenly you're a mechanical person, and then suddenly you're the most expressive person. Why can you not start with that from when you hit the bar on the first step, sort of?
Yeah, make that connection. That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure. Well, let's move on to one of our segments. Laurel, what have you been reading this week?
Sure. So, in thinking about having Anders here, partially improvised performances, partially composed, you're dealing with situations that are highly stimulating and super adrenaline pushing, but also situations where you want to be at peak performance of high execution all the time. And so when I was reading Mindful, a magazine that I have a subscription to, when I came across an article about meditation coach George Mumford, I just knew I had to talk about this. So though
is that Mumford and Sons? Is that guy?
No, it's not Mumford and Sons.
Those are good tunes, though.
Yeah. So,
all right. I haven't ruined anybody's thing in a while. It's kind of sorry.
Yeah, so George Mumford is a meditation coach, and if you're like me, you had not heard of him, but you've heard of some of his top collaborators. One being Phil Jackson, who's currently the president of the New York Knicks and was previously head coach of the LA Lakers and the Chicago Bulls, and so therefore some of George's top students are Michael Jordan, Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, whom I'm sure everybody out there has heard of. And what George really specializes in is a mindful approach for athletes who, like us, are always aiming for peak performance all the time, especially when you're highly stimulated. And through his decades of work, he's come up with 3 basic principles and written a book about those. So his 3 basic principles for peak performance are, number 1, to be still and know. Sometimes you just need to observe. Number 2, to forget yourself and therefore find yourself. And number 3, that mindfulness alone isn't enough. And that particular one, he expands upon it to say that just to be a mindful athlete or a mindful performer of something isn't enough. You need to be a mindful person so that you're practicing these ideas of observation and of calm and collected action in all areas of your life. So I thought I would read just a tiny excerpt from his book called The Mindful Athlete: Secrets to Pure Performance. He says, and as I go through this, you can probably just interchange the word athlete for musician and, game with concert, all of that. Nearly every athlete or successful individual I've worked with has had intention and a clear sense of purpose. Some of us say we don't know what our intention or purpose is, but often we simply haven't spent enough time listening to ourselves carefully and in silence. To help with that, it can be useful to try some deep listening, which he describes as the practice of stopping and listening without judgment or advice. So sit down, rest your mind, and ask yourself, what do I really want? What is my life for? And he says if you go deep enough, intention will emerge. You'll have an opportunity to honestly evaluate yourself, and when you're reflecting on a habit or action, such as an obstacle you perceive or something you think you've accomplished, take the time to ask, am I deluded, or is this really happening the way it seems to me? And then he says, ask friends, teammates, coaches, teachers, what they think about what you're perceiving. And he says that's why they're there, is to show you where your blind spots are in your perception of your own life. If we listen deeply, we can observe and investigate a habit or action without being identified with it and without pushing it away or pulling it in. We can just observe and ask what would happen if this is true. As athletes, we need to take more time to listen to our bodies. If you have a pain in your body, whether it's tendinitis, a headache, or a cramp, don't struggle to get past it. Stop and listen to your body. Surrender to being with what is. Ask yourself, what is the lesson for me to learn here? Have I been overdoing it? Have I been going too hard for too long? Your body's like a circuit breaker. Injury is its way of protecting you and telling you to change something. Learn to listen and to trust that skill, that small voice inside, the voice of self-knowing. As you learn to practice listening deeply to yourself and to your body, you'll find that you can listen better to others, whether it's your boss, your partner, your child, or your teammate. When you really listen to a person without judging or interrupting, it may feel as though you're hearing them for the first time.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, I love that primary thing is just like slow down and listen. It seems like I'm always saying that in master classes and lessons. Like, dude, give that a little space before you start. Give that a little space before when you hit the last note. Like, you need to just let that last note finish. Like you're interrupting the last note by moving or kind of bowing too early, or it's like just like, slow down in general. Sorry, Ben, I had something.
And especially in any kind of improvisational situation, you have to listen to what they're doing. If you don't listen to what somebody else is doing, it's just a real hot mess.
So I was doing some reading this week, and I told Laurel about this book. Maybe we'll talk about it at some point. There's this book called Creativity, Inc. by Ed Catmull, who's one of the founders of Pixar. And when Pixar was founded, like their first successful, feature film was Toy Story. And after Toy Story, Disney wanted them to make Toy Story 2. And to make a long story short, they ended up having 9 months to produce this movie, effectively. So the entire company was working basically in overdrive, and there was a story in the book, I'll read it right now. It says, one morning in June, an overtired artist drove to work with his infant child strapped into the back seat, intending to deliver the baby to daycare on the way. Sometime later, after he'd been at work for a few hours, his wife, also a Pixar employee, happened to ask him how the drop-off had gone, which is when he realized that he'd left their child in the car in the broiling Pixar parking lot. They rushed out to find the baby unconscious and poured cold water over him immediately. Thankfully, the child was okay, but the trauma of this moment, the what could have been, was imprinted deeply on my brain. Asking this much of our people, even when they wanted to give it, was not acceptable. I had expected the road to be rough, but I had to admit that we were coming apart. By the time the film was complete, a full third of the staff would have some kind of repetitive stress injury. And that's kind of, after that, he talks about you really do have to listen, and even if it seems like everyone's super into it and working super hard, if it's not healthy, it's not healthy. And it's like this is how people get carpal tunnel syndrome and things, is because as percussionists we say, I have to practice. I have to do this for hours a day, and then we end up leaving a child in the back seat because we're so tired. So yeah, that was a very direct correlation I drew to what Laura was saying.
Wow. Yeah, I leave kids in the back seat all the time.
Yeah, things happen.
Just kidding, everybody. I don't have kids. Nor would I do that. Yeah, I write about this a lot on my blog, Ben, and you mentioned carpal tunnel, and it's crazy what just looking at the structure of a lower arm will do to, like, when I actually looked at how many tendons there are that can get damaged, I was like, no wonder we get hurt. Like, we have to really pay attention to this. It's super crazy. But I'll just conclude my segment with a list of the books that George finds must-reads in terms of learning peak performance and how to be mindful. So, of course, there's his book called The Mindful Athlete, but he also mentions Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, whom we've talked about, the book Zen and the Art of Archery, The Inner Game of Tennis, Second Wind, The Three Laws of Performance, Rewriting the Future of Your Organization and Your Life, The Four Agreements, The Cambridge Handbook of Expertise and Expert Performance, Introducing NLP, Psychological Skills for Understanding and Influencing People, Mind and Brain, and lastly, The Power of Awareness. So just anybody out there, I wasn't really in tune with this type of thinking and books until grad school, but that doesn't mean you have to wait till grad school to read some. So some of those you may have heard of, and hopefully others are new. A lot of them are new to me, and I look forward to reading them.
Do you have that? I think it's right there on my desk, Laurel. Do you have that Rhythms of the Game book?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Can you just, I think we've mentioned that before, but
yeah, we have.
I actually haven't read this yet, but the one of the authors there, I saw his clinic, and yeah, it was very cool. Say something, Laurel, so it pops up to you.
Okay. This is the cover of the book.
Okay.
So you've got baseball, guitar.
Write it down.
Yep.
And of course, yeah, it's of course about this marriage of musical study and athleticism and discipline and also performance. He talks a lot about. It's David Gluck, right? Is the author there?
He's one of them. The main one is Bernie Williams.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Well, I saw the clinic from David Gluck, and it was just really great about performance and like how prepared you need to be, where your brain needs to be, and how musicians and athletes are very similar. I love having this conversation with my dad because he was an athlete. He played basketball for LSU, and he's still really into sports a lot. And yeah, we talk a lot about just performance at large. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that you said that struck me, Laurel, is that you have to practice this. You have to practice mindfulness in all areas of your life, So I think we directly relate it to music, but I think trying to do that, I mean, like Ben said with that story, really just in all areas of your life with a lot of things that you're doing. And I've been thinking about this a lot since I've been taking a mindful class, and I noticed that last night, sitting in a concert, it even was helping with being able to hone my focus into one thing and simply being aware when your mind wanders, And I found myself much more present in the concert when I think during the school year at school concerts, my mind constantly wanders because there's 8 million things going on, and you're in the same performance hall, and you're often watching the same performers. And yeah, for the first time in a musical setting with me in the audience, I felt myself completely more aware, and it was a really interesting experience.
Wow, that's really cool.
Well, it's interesting how being more aware, you actually you need to think about less. Like you need to turn off all that activity. And I've noticed if I have a memory slip during a performance, it's because I'm thinking too much. Yeah. I'm thinking way too much about like, oh yeah, after I finish this, I have to give a little talk about it and. Or like something else, or like, oh yeah, what am I going to play next, or should I hold for no applause, or should I take a bow after this one, or should I segue it, or am I thinking way too much and then I screw up, Yeah.
So I have a question for Anders, or I guess anyone really. But one thing Laurel's talking about is really focusing and concentrating. And one thing that I've kind of referred to is not going in there and just hitting the marimba, and until you get a repetitive stress injury. And one thing I talk about with my students is that practicing isn't only the act of going up to the instrument and hitting it. It's also doing score study. It's also you know, just simply thinking about what am I going to practice today. You can't just walk in the room and open up the score and start there. You have to know what you're doing. So are there any of these other, I'll call them non-practicing things, Anders, that you would recommend for people to do in addition to actually, you know, playing? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I mean, what do I say in this case?
Because like one quick example I always think of is in undergrad we all had to take aural skills, which obviously aural skills is fantastic for your musicality. But I never felt like I practiced aural skills enough. You know, like I never went into the room and practiced sight singing at a piano or anything. I did, but not enough, I don't think.
Come on, we're a percussionist. No, but I think, first of all, I mean, I come from a little different times, so I hear that, in different situations. And I grew up, I will answer that question hopefully soon, but I grew up in a situation where I always play with people who are much older than me and much better. And for example, when I start to play drums, it's like, okay, do you understand? Okay, no, but okay, let's go. And then it's like you try to figure out what's going on all the time, and that has sort of been my follow in a lot of ways. And then when I start to play in this, let's say we're subbing in chamber situations or chromata, whatever, how should I get to the music as quick as I can? So I study the score, I study my part, of course, I record my part, and then I play the other parts around in the score, so I exactly know what's going on in the music, just talking about preparation. So if you have a marimba piece, for example, I would recommend to take it first and maybe go to the piano. Play it on the piano, figure out how it sounds like with the phrasing and with the sustain, that the marimba note can really do at the same time like a piano can do. Suddenly you have a little different approach and sing along with the phrases. And then, of course, write what is the harmony? What is it based on? There is many times you probably have the same experience, I'm sure. You ask, what key are you in? Key? What is the chord? Chord? Like, and it's nothing wrong about the students, but it's a lot of target shooting sometimes when we do we learn the notes.
Yeah.
But we don't learn what is the harmony, what do I play here? Yeah, so that's recommendation, figure this out. But my biggest tool is like record.
And listen.
And listen, don't listen immediately after, but listen when you're in the bed in the evening with headphones. And probably you will fall asleep after a while, but I think that's when things start to happen. Then have a little notebook and say, tomorrow I will work on this and this, blah, blah, blah. So you make your own practice diary to yourself, sort of.
Well, I think students, a lot of times you say, you know, what's the harmony here? What key are you in? And they immediately think, well, how is that going to help me with this particular performance? It's like, yes, the progression is this, this, this. But I think they don't realize it's like, no, well, just you realizing that and reminding yourself that and knowing that that's what the key is, what the harmony is, it's helping you for later. You know, I'm not so invested in your one performance of this one piece. I'm invested in you as a 4-year student or a 2-year student or something, and you being able to recognize harmony with your ear and with quickly at sight is going to help you on the long term, not just with this particular little thing. So I think they get frustrated with us sometimes.
Of course, but a tool I had some good kind of success with, I think, was like, let's say you have a marimba piece and it starts with a D7 chord, for example, the first 2 bars. Then they play what's written, and then I take out the D7 chord and we improvise for 2 bars, go back to the first bars, improvise, back, etc., etc. So you start to get in that mood, you understand. Then you go to next, then go to next, and then you start to combine. Then you can play like from bar number 1 to 12, for example, but then you can play bar number 1, go to bar number 5, jump around. So you really like, you know, climbing around in the piece in different orders and so on. Maybe it's not the right way, but many times it works because you do it like it's like to go do research really into the piece.
Hey, Anders, Megan would like to ask you, have you ever heard of a piece for like a fighter jet or anything?
I just saw on your website that you have had some commissions for like composing for ice sculptures or instruments, and something with fighter aircraft and something about tractors. Could you tell us a little more about these projects?
I was just waiting for that question. No, it's like, being up north, teaching there many years. There has some really fantastic artists, like making sculptures, making everything from ice to whatever, fire sculptures. So they contact me, and we played on ice instruments, for example, and there was two brothers. They just made something. So you need to figure out how should this sound. For example, they made like an ice box, and then you make bars like a vibraphone or marimba bars, whatever. Put a microphone in, and you need to play very soft because it's very easy to break them. So the sound is like between glass and wood, kind of, to explain it in a kind of nice way. The first time I played, it was really started melting. So it was the first time I really felt like really rock artist. I can like cross everything. It's like smashing everything and so on. But we're playing on this stage, and I say, I need a new one. Okay, then you had like, woo! Like next one come out, like next, like okay, it's like. And I was thinking, speaking of improvisation, if you are totally stuck, that you will have a notation in something, it's like you get stuck. So in this, improvisation is a fantastic tool, and of course, I bring people that I know and understand what we are trying to do. And I said, let's try this rhythmic idea and stay there and see what happens. And everybody, okay, and then you go, sort of. And so the Fideria thing, there was like a meeting for the European Union board of blah, 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 something. So they were traveling around Sweden. So they came up to a hangar for Fideriats. And they came in, this is like January, cold like crazy. Totally black, and then one light, there was an ice bar, everything is made of ice, even the glass you drink from, etc. And then you go to the tables, suddenly one light on one Fideriat where there was a dancer dancing on the Fideriat. Then next thing was that me and Rolf, I think, we played on two pan flutes made of ice. We walk in between the tables, and we had little extra ice bag with some extras because they're melting after a while. So after a while, the tuning was like, ah. So
with your breath, right?
Yeah. So I threw them on the table and people can see them. And then we walked to the Fideriat. So there was the two Dragon planes plus the motor from a Dragon plane. So they were kind of standing like this, and then they have the motor in the front. Incredible sound. And I worked with the military people for the whole day. And I had I had 6 players with me, and we tried different sounds, etc. So then we came up with a structure. And first we tried with sticks and so on. Then one of the military guys said, "Do you think you can play softer? This plane costs a lot of money." And we realized, of course. So you're ending up with brushes. But for example, on the back wing of the flight, it was like we found a bass line, so it was like dum, 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 and we play brushes all over, dressed like pilots.
Oh my god!
And then after that, there was a choir singing together with a Same. Same is like had this special singing called Joik, and then during that we were running out, and then the doors open, and there is a 11-meter long track with ice instruments. We're ending the show with that. So that's I had some of those gigs going on for some years, and I've always been interested to figure out different sounds. So you need to spend like a day to figure out what you can do.
I had a quick follow-up question to this. Another famous percussionist is very well known for improvisation is Keiko Abe, and I remember seeing not too long ago you improvised with her, I think in Japan.
Yeah.
How can you tell us about that experience, and what you two, in my mind, have very different styles of improvisation. So could you tell us about that a bit?
Yeah. I don't think I put out the video. Maybe I can do it later. But I never worked with Keiko before. I met her in Sweden many times. She was in Sweden in the 80s a lot, and 90s with the Chromata ensemble. So we always met, sort of. Never really played with her. But then when I went to Japan in November, I got an email from her. Said, "Can you come to my school?" and blah blah blah. And so I said, "How about if we play something together first?" And said, "Yes." And So I had my cooking brushes, and I show her. Have you heard the sound? It's like, oh wow! And you see this. I don't know how old she is, but it's like she's like a kid, super excited. So immediately she took her, what do you call them? You know, the mallets with looks like pillows.
Like slap mallets, yeah.
Yeah, her
Thank you.
slap.
Thank you. So we started from there, and then it turned out to be a mix of, I think, some Swedish, probably folkish stuff together with some Japanese anything / really avant-garde, wonderful things. So and it was really groovy. It was really, really nice meeting.
And you said there was a video of it?
Yeah.
I'd love to see that sometime.
It's I will send it soon.
Well, you know, Anders, you're a educational consultant for Zildjian, and Ben was going to talk a little bit about the history of the Zildjian company.
Yeah, but I decided I just want to talk about Keiko Abe instead. No. Yeah, so since Anders works for Zildjian, and in fact, a lot of the time when he's in the U.S., he's doing business with Zildjian. Like even when I had him in Florida, he was, you know, on the phone with Keith Aleo a lot and doing kind of Zildjian stuff. So if you look on the Zildjian website, there's just this excellent, just very comprehensive history of the company. So I'm going to try to give the Cliff Notes version of it because we could be here all day just talking about Zildjian history. But anyway, the Zildjian company, Avitus I in the early 17th century developed this secret process for, he was an alchemist working in Constantinople, and he created this process for treating alloys, and he applied it to cymbals, and the resulting cymbals had just like extraordinary clarity and sustain. And so the Sultan adopted these cymbals, and in 1922, Sultan Osman II gave Avitus 80 gold pieces, and he gave him the family name of Zildjian. And in Turkish, zil means cymbal. I've also heard that zil means bell, so those two words, I think in Turkish, might mean basically the same thing. The DJ part means maker, and IAN is the Armenian suffix meaning son of. So the word Zildjian basically means cymbal maker.
Did you say he was an alchemist?
Yes, he was an alchemist living in
you meant to say that?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
That was on purpose. So then in 1623, 1 year after the Zildjian name was bestowed upon Avitus, he received the Sultan's blessing to leave the Ottoman palace, and he started his own cymbal foundry in Samatya, which is in the suburbs of Constantinople. And then in 1651, he passed his secret alloy process along to his son, his eldest son, Achem, who succeeded him. Then in the late 17th century, around 1680, classical composers began to incorporate cymbals into their works. The first known example was Nicholas Adam Strunk in his opera Esther. And then throughout the 1700s, it obviously became even more and more prominent with Mozart using cymbals in Il Seraglio. Haydn used them in the Military Symphony. In the 19th century, Beethoven, of course, in his Ninth Symphony used cymbals. And then I found this really interesting. In the 1800s, Berlioz and Wagner were featuring an abundance of cymbals in their works, and they actually specifically requested Zildjian cymbals be used. And Berlioz, at the end of Symphonie Fantastique, basically invented the idea of a suspended cymbal by striking a cymbal with a mallet instead of crashing two together. So then in the late 19th century, mid-19th century, 1851, Avitus II built his own schooner, which is a type of ship with sails, and sailed to Marseille and London in 1851 and 1862, respectively, and exhibited his cymbals at international trade fairs where he won medals and certificates of commendation. In 1865, Avitus II died and passed the business on to his younger brother, Karopi, who was exporting 1,300 pairs of cymbals per year throughout Europe, and he continued to travel to these exhibitions, and he won honors in Paris, Vienna, Boston, Bologna, and Chicago. In 1868, the Zildjian factory suffered a series of disastrous fires that almost put them out of business. And the Sultan at the time interceded, and he said we needed to do everything necessary to be done to help the Zildjian family, whose quality of cymbals is unrivaled throughout the world. So the Sultan kind of saved the day with that. Then in 1909, Karopi Zildjian passed the secret process along to Aram, who was the second son of Avidus II. Aram had to temporarily flee to Budapest for political reasons, and he opened the second Zildjian factory, but then he later on returned to Constantinople. In 1927, as Aram was getting older, he wrote to Avidus III, who was an American citizen and had a successful candy factory, and basically told him he needed to carry on the family business. Avidus III agreed, but it was under the condition the business would relocate to America. Then Aram agreed to that part of the deal, and Aram came to the States to help set up the new foundry with Avidus III. So in 1929, the company was incorporated in Quincy, Massachusetts, as the jazz era began. And this, in the 1930s, started a relationship with many jazz artists, including Gene Krupa, who was one of the first really big drum set artists to play Zildjian, and he helped them develop their cymbals more appropriately to drum set, mostly by making them thinner. Also interesting in this jazz era is that Avidus III had faced discrimination in Turkey, so he embraced African American musicians at the time, and he refused to discriminate because of what he had experienced. And then I found this really interesting. In the 1940s, when America was in World War II, copper and tin were rationed by the War Production Board, and the Zildjians specifically received an allocation of copper and tin to fill American and British military band orders, which allowed their business to continue. And by the year 1950, Zildjian employed 15 workers and output 70,000 cymbals per year. The artist roster grew to include, in addition to Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, Max Roach, Shelly Manne, Elvin Jones, and Tony Williams. And this was one of my favorite facts. In 1964, the Beatles appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show with Ringo playing Zildjian cymbals, which caused just an explosion of business. Keep in mind that in 1950, they were outputting 70,000 cymbals per year. In 1964, they ended the year with a 90,000 cymbal back order.
Wow.
So,
Good.
thanks, Ringo, from the Zildjian family.
Yeah.
And probably partially because of this, in 1973, they opened a new state-of-the-art manufacturing facility in Norwell, Massachusetts, and the company celebrated its 350th anniversary. Then in 1976, Avidus III invited his granddaughter, Craigie Zildjian, to join the company, who was the first female in the family lineage to join the company. Armand took over the company in 1977. In 1979, Avidus passed away, and then finally in 1999, the business was passed along to Craigie Zildjian, and Craigie and Debbie continue the family business, and it is actually the oldest family-owned business in the world, not just music-related, but any family-owned business. It is the oldest one in the world. So that is kind of a very brief synopsis of the Zildjian history.
Wow,
Cool.
good.
Still a
Thank
factory,
you. Thank you.
Say that
Very
one more
good,
time,
man.
Megan?
still a factory in Turkey at all, or is there still business in
No, what I learned
No.
actually when I was studying at North Texas is that once the kind of business itself had been moved to the States, there were still artisans in Turkey, and there's what's the company that took over for those artisans that remained? I'll Google it and I'll figure it out.
Sabian.
Not Sabian, no.
Oh.
That's another country.
It's oh God. This is gonna bug
Sorry,
me.
I forgot. I should know that. But
It
Anders,
is.
what's it like being an educational consultant for Zildjian?
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's actually a short story, but it came from a dinner with Keith. He was in Sweden. I invited him. He was in a festival. Blah blah blah. This is 2007, I think. And he asked if I know someone who can be, working for Europe and doing more reach out with the orchestral cymbals to orchestras, to schools, etc. And after a while, he looked at me and said, "Can you do it?" If it's about sales, no, I'm not a salesperson. But if it's about marketing, then I mean, that's what we do in one or another way anyway. So, and I signed with Zildjian in '99, with the whole basic show started and all the stuff. So, and I grew up with the cymbals, of course. So I've always been playing them. So, anyway, I agreed, and we didn't really had 100% know what we should. But what we actually, the result is, we made some flight cases. So I have like 3 or 4 flight cases, and I have almost all the pairs you can think of, 3, 4 pair of each. And I, for example, send it to an orchestra in Germany, and I go down there. I spend a day with the orchestra, with the players, and in their hall. And then the result could be that they pick like 5 to 10 pairs and fresh up their collections, etc. Go to some trade shows, standing in the booth and look smart. Sure. But the biggest thing was actually when I came to the office the first time, because that was 2008, and you really, exactly what Ben was into, it really hit you that I'm standing here in the whole history of all this kind of, it's a magic moment.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure where we are right now time-wise. I don't think a lot of people sort of really know or pay attention. I'm really thankful, Ben, that you sort of do all this research and spread that word. I think it's I'm kind of paradox with the whole history part, if you should know all the history, but sometimes in this case I think it's so interesting history, and especially that they have the mix is the same like it was back in the days.
Yeah.
So there is, and I meet the job I do right now. I mean, I can be anything from university. I do sometimes a tour between schools and together with orchestras. I pick one of the most kind of popular players, for example, in UK, let's say Neil Percy, and I have him to make some seminars because he's an up-to-date person working in an orchestra. And I teach people about the different kinds of sounds, what is the difference, etc., etc. What is an A symbol, what is a K symbol, and all the stuff. And to be honest, I didn't really know all that stuff until I started. So I suddenly got 60 pairs I should try. I was like, wow. But it gives a lot of ideas. And
Real
it
quick,
also, yeah.
I just want to interject and say the company that the artisans that were remaining in Turkey is Bosphorus.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks. Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Ben. Yep.
Wow.
So anyway, so it's that's very much what I do. And sometimes people come here to my studio and they try out cymbals, and we now have a project, Keith and I, where we make videos with different players from orchestras, where we ask for 4 different kinds of pieces. For example, of course, Tchaikovsky or Dvorak or something, and how do you do your interpretation? What kind of cymbals do you pick? And then immediately you get, if you sit in a school, wherever you sit, you get the answer that, wow, you can see there's different traditions about sounds, what you like. So I know sometimes, for example, I think in the States they think that we play a lot of dark cymbals here in Europe, but it's not really true. It's like it really changed where you go.
It'll be real interesting when we finally perfect time travel, and you can go ask Tchaikovsky which pair of cymbals he wants, and you can have him into the factory and everything.
And, yeah, he show his own. This is my.
Yeah, he can show you the ones he made. Yeah.
Tchaikovsky, I believe in the original, actually asked for 14-inch new beat hi-hats.
I think you're
absolutely.
Right. Yeah, ZBT China. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. Hey, you know, a group that comes up with your name a lot, Anders, is the Global Percussion Network, and of course our friend Evaristo Aguilar gave me this CD right there. But I was just wondering, could you tell us a little bit about the Global Percussion Network and your involvement and kind of what it is?
It's right now we have kind of a low key because everybody work with different projects, and for example, right now we're 3 players. We're 4 from the beginning. I think from 2009 or something, we decided to be, or even earlier, to be 3 players. So it's, and we had, it started with that we have all the setups, that all the percussion groups, a lot of drums, all that stuff. Then after a while we realized wherever you go to South America and you spend 2 days to find all the drums and all that stuff. So we said, no, let's be a keyboard group. and so it's ending up with 2 marimbas and a vibe, and kind of easy going. So it's Daniel Saur. He's based up in Piteå, work with an ensemble called Neo. Neo is like a modern ensemble, like Ensemble Modern, Pierre Boulez ensemble, that style. It's an 8-piece band. Rolf Lamberg, he'd been with the Swedish Army until now. Now he started to be a freelancer, and 2 super talented people to work with. And the whole thing started actually 2001. I got a call from a recording label, Opus Free in Sweden, and he always been I recorded some years earlier with him in the old-fashioned way with the what do you call it, with the wheels. And
tape, yeah.
Thank you. And then 2001, he called me and said, I will start digital and I will do 5.1. Do you have a percussion group? I said, no, but I can call some people. Yes, do it. So a few months later, we did a recording, and the recording was with the name Rauk. And I think it got some kind of success, and then everybody looked on each other and said, hey, let's start a group. This is fun. And that was a little turn off for me also to decide that I will compose more for keyboards in this style, sort of. It's more like a band in a lot of ways, because I use element. I mean, it's like his bass lines, his chords, and I know exactly how I should treat Daniel and Rolf. I give Daniel all the hard parts, and then Rolf and me, we have the easier way to do it, and I can fly on top of it.
I'm sure you have the easy stuff. Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah,
of course.
We don't believe you. Hey, well, I have to wrap up the episode because I know Ben has to go teach a lesson. Thanks, Ben. We really wanted to talk longer, but I guess you're going to do that to us again. But man, Anders Astrand it's just great to see you every time I do on the road or at PASIC. You're such a positive entity in the percussion world, and just thank you so much for just being the kindest person to everyone, and literally everyone, and just being so open and awesome. And it's really great having you in the scene. And thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you for all the great work you do. It's very, very inspiring. Just that this stuff you do, and all the composing you do, all the playing and all the teaching, gives me vitamins. Thank you.
You do give us vitamins as well. Well, awesome. Hey, thanks again, and we'll see you again soon, I'm sure, for something.
Absolutely. Okay. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye-bye.